Hello there and welcome back. This is another 5th and 6th grade decimals video, and this video is going to be focusing on how to multiply decimals by whole numbers. Okay, here is our first example. We're going to take the decimal 0.2 and multiply it by the number 92. Okay, so let's go ahead and start by saying that most of the time when we multiply decimals, we ignore the decimals at first and we just multiply. So if I was going to do that, I'd start by writing 92 here, and then I would ignore the decimal, making this 0, 2, and then I would cut out the 0 in front because we don't need it there as a placeholder. So I'm going to really just multiply 92 times 2. Now for this video, I'm going to be doing the multiplication using standard algorithm. If you use a different method to multiply big numbers, go ahead and use it. That's totally fine. So 2 times 2 is 4. And 9 times 2 is 18. So I'd put an 8 here and a 1 here. So when I'm done multiplying, I get the answer of 184. Now here comes the decimal part. So I'm going to put a decimal at the end of my answer. I'm going to move that decimal to the left, the same number of spaces as I had decimals in the beginning of this problem. So in this original problem right here, 0.2 was our decimal, and there was one digit in a decimal place value. That means I'm going to move the decimal for my answer one place to the left and leave it right there. So instead of after the 4, it's between the 8 and the 4. That makes my final answer 18.4 instead of 184. Okay, here is our next example. We're going to take the number 0.6 and multiply it by 36. So again, I'm going to completely ignore the decimal that is in the 0.6 at first, which would give me 0, 6, and then I'm going to ignore that 0 in front because having 0 tens, I don't really need to put that into the multiplication problem. So I'm going to start by putting, because I'm doing standard algorithm, so I need to put the number that has the most digits on the top. So I'm going to put 36 up here and the 6 down here. Now I'm going to multiply. 6 times 6 is 36, so I'd put the 6 here and regroup the 3. Then 3 times 6 is 18. 18 plus 3 is 21. So I'd end up with 216. So now comes the decimal part. I'm going to add a decimal to the end of the answer. I'm going to move that decimal to the left, the same number of spaces as there were decimals in the original problem. So the original problem had this decimal right here, 0.6. That decimal has one digit in the decimal place value. So I'm going to move this decimal one place into the left of the answer. So that means the decimal is now going to be after the 1 and before the 6. So my final answer to this would be 21.6. Okay, here is our next one. We're going to take 0.17 and multiply it by 26. So again, I'm still ignoring the decimal. So if I ignore the decimal, this would be 0.17. And I can always get rid of one of those decimals in the front. So really to multiply this, I'm going to multiply 17 times 26. Since both of those numbers are 2-digit numbers, it doesn't matter which one I put on the top if I'm using standard algorithm. So I'll just go ahead and put the 17 first and put the 26 down here. If you prefer it the other way, that is totally fine. 7 times 6 is 42, so I'll put a 2 here and a 4 up here. 1 times 6 is 6. Plus 4 would be 10, so I'll put that right here. Now I'm going to have to add a 0 to show that now I'm multiplying by a number in the tens place. I can cross off the 6 because I'm done multiplying by 6, and I can even cross off this 4 up here because I don't really need it. I've already used it. 7 times 2 is 14, so I'll put the 4 here and regroup the 1. 1 times 2 is 2, plus 1 is 3, so I'm going to put a 3 right here. Now I need to add those together. So I got 2 here, 4 here, and 4 here. I'm going to add a decimal to the end of this answer. And now I need to move it to the left, the same number of spaces as there were decimals in the original problem. So I go back up to the original problem and I see this decimal right here. This decimal had 2 digits that were in decimal place values, one in the tenths place and one in the hundredths place. So I need to move the decimal for the answer 2 places, 1, 2. So that final decimal is going to be between the two 4s, making my final answer 4.42. Okay, here is our next example. I'm going to be multiplying 1.5 times 83. So again, I'm going to ignore this decimal here and just rewrite this as 15. So if I take the decimal out, 1.5 becomes 15. Since those are both two-digit numbers, it doesn't matter which one I put on top. So I'm going to put 15 on top and 83 on the bottom here. Again, if you like to multiply big numbers in a different way, please feel free to do so. I'm just doing standard algorithm for this video. 5 times 3 is 15. And then 1 times 3 is 3 plus 1 would be 4. So there's my top row there. Add a 0 here, cross this off, cross this off. Then I'm going to do 5 times 8, which is 40. So a 0 here and regroup the 4. 1 times 8 is 8, plus 4 is 12. So I'm going to put that here. When I add those together, I get 5, I get 4, I get 2, and I get 1. Now I'm going to need to add a decimal at the end right here. And now I need to move it to the left, the same number of spaces as there were decimals in my original problem. So when I go back to the original problem, I have 1.5 as my decimal. That decimal only has one digit in a decimal place value. It only has a 5 in the 10th place. So that means for the answer, I'm only going to move the decimal one space. So even though it's a two-digit number, it only had one decimal. That's why I only moved it once. So the final answer is going to be 124.5. Okay, here is our next one and our last one for today's video. We're going to multiply 4.9 times 435. So again, I want to ignore the decimal right here and rewrite that by taking the decimal away as 49. So since I'm using standard algorithm, that means I want to put the number with the most digits on the top. So this time I have to put the 435 on the top and the 49 down here. Again, if you're multiplying a different way, using a different method for multiplication, that is totally fine. Once you get your answer, you're still going to place your decimal at the end and move it the number of spaces that you need. So the method of multiplication might be different, but what you do with that answer and the decimal will be the same as you're seeing in this video. So 5 times 9 is 45. So I'll put a 5 here and a 4 up here. 3 times 9 is 27. And then if I add 4 to that, I end up with this being 11 and 31. Okay, so this is 1, and this is 3. Then 4 times 9 is 36. 36 plus 3 is 39. So this is my first row. Okay, now I'm going to go through. I'm going to erase this. I'm going to cross this off, cross these off, and add a 0 to show that now I'm multiplying by a number in the tens place. 5 times 4 is 20, so 0 here and 2 up here. 3 times 4 is 12. 12 plus 2 is 14, so 4 here, 1 up here. 4 times 4 is 16, plus 1 is 17. So 17 right here. Okay, so 5, 1, 13. Then 3 plus 7 is 10, plus 1 is 11, and then 2. So now that I got my multiplication answer, I'm going to add a decimal to the end right here. I'm going to move it to the left, the same number of spaces as I have decimals in the original problem. So when I go back to the original problem, in the decimal 4.9, I have one digit in a decimal place value. That means I'm going to move the decimal for the answer one place to the left. So I'm going to move it right here and put it right there. So my final answer is 2,131.5. All right, you guys, thank you so much for joining me today. Hope to see you in another video soon.